gents, welcome back to the Next Deal podcast. This is Vince Hall. As always, we got Justin Dossie in the house too. Justin, what's
What
up?
up? How's it going?
This is our second episode from being back from the summer break, I suppose. And we have Brian Ferguson straight out of Texas with us. Brian's been in real estate for 18 plus years now.
Yep.
He's done over 2,000 deals. So this dude knows what he's talking about. So if you are listening and you got a notebook, get your pen out, take some notes. Justin and I will surely ask some good questions in this podcast. But Brian, go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell us how you got started in all this.
Sure. So Brian Ferguson, I'm out of Victoria, Texas. So we're kind of triangulated about 2 hours from Houston, Austin, San Antonio, smaller town, sub 100,000 population. Started out about 18 years ago. I was in the automotive industry. Actually started out in the automotive industry when I wasn't even legal to work there. My dad had signed a consent form, and I went from selling to got in finance, and right then learned how much I love numbers and finance. And then we started flipping houses on the side, watching TV. And then that went from doing a few of them, and then got into, they gave me an ultimatum, work here or do this. So I jumped 2 feet in, left a multiple six-figure job, and with no idea of what I was doing really. And we went from 2 to 10 to now, we'll clear 200 transactions some years on a busy year.
Yeah. What car dealership or auto make did you work for?
We were back then, I'm dating myself a little bit, but it was Ford Lincoln Mercury.
Okay.
So
I started in high school. My stepdad worked at a car dealership as the GM, and I started as a car porter.
Okay.
So just, washing the cars for Toyota, Cadillac, and Hummer.
Okay.
Is
that where call porter came from? Like you went back to your roots there?
No, that's kind of funny. Justin and his brother started the business, but yeah, I remember going to like prom, in a Hummer, because they would just let me take it.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I remember those days. That was the hardest part. I remember when they gave me the ultimatum, my boss came in and said, "Hey, I see you're doing this side business." Cause we now had, my partner at the time was also in the business, and he had already left. So he'd come pick me up for lunch or whatever. And it had our we buy houses all over the side of it. He's like, "I see you have another business. So you have an ultimatum, you either work here or, and not only did I think about, I'm losing my salary, how am I paying my bills, any of that. The biggest thing I realized when I walked out the door was like, crap, that was a demo. I don't have a car. I don't own a vehicle. And so it was like, kind of had to walk around the side of the building and start calling people, seeing who could pick me up the fastest so I could get out of there. So I missed the days of the free vehicle.
So you started with flipping when you got into real estate?
I did. I started flipping, and we did that for, I guess the first few years, that's all we did. And then we got into more of the long-term holdings because, we started this in 06 going into 07, 08. So it wasn't the best time, in hindsight, if I'd have done research, it probably wasn't the best time to get into it. Well, I don't know. It depends on how you look at that. So what would happen is we'd buy these houses and we couldn't sell them. So instead of taking a loss, we would hold them. And then that just accumulated, and we did that a lot. And that's what really built our fleet later on, all the equity we had in those. So, but yeah, we started just flipping in the beginning.
Yeah. When you started doing the flipping, were they pretty big projects right away? Were you taking on smaller projects and kind of, worked your way up?
And it was all over there. The first one we bought, there was actually 3 of us in the beginning, because there was a guy we worked with who had like 8 rental properties. And so to us, he was like the god of real estate. He had it all figured out. He made it through 3 of them, and then we didn't want to put any money back in. So then there was 2, but the first one we bought was $10,000. Didn't even do our due diligence, and like the back, once we got the keys and owned it, the back had caved in. It was a mess. Oh, no. And then our second one was probably, I don't know, it was probably sold nowadays, probably a $300,000 house. Back then it was probably 160, 180. But then we slowly, I'd say within 2 years, we'd buy anything at the auction. We made connections, found funding, and we'd buy anything 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. But for the most part, it was, those 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And then we got into a niche of buying and we did at one point, I think we had about 400 and something notes. So we were doing tons of owner financing, put some into rentals. And then it just slowly, like, we didn't just have this is our only exit plan. We would just, whatever would work best or we needed to do.
Yeah. When you talk about funding, I just made a video. I'll release it on social media pretty soon, but just trying to kind of prepare people like now in this last quarter for 2025, you know, kind of some tips and things of that sort. What would be your advice for someone who's a little bit newer, you know, in this quarter to start in 2025 to get funding, right? So the traditional route might not always be the way to go. They can talk to private money lenders. They can talk to hard money lenders, you know, partnerships. Like, what would be your advice to somebody kind of getting into this?
You know, the way I did it, I know, you know, when we started, you know, 18 years ago, you didn't have, I mean, nowadays, I bet I get, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 emails a week from, you know, this loan, 100% this, plus, you know, these fixed and flip. That didn't exist back then. Then going into the banks was, it was as hard then as it is right now. Again, like if someone new walking to a bank and wanted to get a fix and flip loan, it would be tough. And it was then. I mean, we had 750, 800 credit scores, made really good money on the first ones and got turned down by almost every bank in town because we didn't have any experience. But my connection path was always with private, like go find someone that's high net worth. Someone I've learned that you go find people that did this, you know, because flipping's been around for years, but find someone that's, you know, let's say they're 50s or 60s. They don't have the desire to go out there and just be the boots on the ground. But those same type of guys, and I'm sure I'll be there in 20 years, but those same type of guys, they still want to kind of be part of it, right? You know, they want to feel like they're still, they're in the game, so to speak. And I've learned if you find them, they're interested, they get it, they're not as scared. And if you find the ones that have, you know, a couple $1 million stashed away and can make decent interest on it, so there's still a piece of it. And we did it in multiple pieces. We do just interest. Some deals, you know, some of the guys, they'd want, you know, 10, 20% of, you know, off the top plus their interest, you know, so we worked out different, but I went and sourced them. You know, I'd go to the county. I saw who was doing these loans. I researched people or I'd see the ones that used to be bigger in flipping and they were getting out of it. So that was the approach I went. Now, if I was today starting, I'd probably just find tons of these private lending companies because there's, you know, all these guys that are raising funds and then lending it out to fix and flippers, you know, and see, we have a private capital fund too. So where we loan out and we only use ours for people for investors that buy from us, we'll fund the deals for them. Yeah. But it's a different world. I think, you know, if you're not getting into it right now because you can't find a way to fund it, you're just not trying hard enough, in my opinion, in today's time. There's just too many options. That's to me is one of the easiest pieces right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many different, like you said, you get emails, there's all kinds of different private lenders, hard money lenders. Like it's very, very easy to get, if you've got a deal, it's very hard to not find money for it.
Yeah. All you got to do is go to like
you couldn't get,
Oh, sorry.
You couldn't get repairs financed. I mean, back then, you know, you had to figure out that. So now, I mean, they'll finance 100% plus up to 80, 90% over here. It's honestly riskier than I'd probably be willing to take most of these lenders.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, all you got to do is just go to your local RIA or some sort of investing meetup. Somebody there is going to say that they're lending.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have one here because we're smaller. So I actually did the first one that I've ever known about in our town. I decided I'm just gonna have to host it. So I did this meetup. The original goal was I did two of them. The original goal was like to find people that wanted to invest more in our syndication side of our business on like the capital company. But it turned into, we had fix and flippers and just different people in this industry. But then one of the guys there, that's what he was there for. He was just there. He just wants to lend capital, you know, as a private lender. So it's out there for sure. You just got to find them.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was going to ask kind of just from your experience overall with starting with flipping, what was kind of the next step for you? Because I'm looking through like the form you had filled out before here, you know, you've got built and managed a diverse portfolio of almost 1,000 multifamily units, residential and retail. So just kind of curious, you know, what that process has been for you over the years.
You know, like the fast paced version of it, we went, like I said, we ended up holding on to a lot of rentals out of necessity because we couldn't sell them, you know, because the first few years when these people would want to rent property and my take on it was like, that's dumb. Why would I wait so many years to get my money when I can sell it next month and get X?
Right.
Now I'm complete opposite. The fix and flip, I call the fix and flip side of the business is my W-2. Because, you know, a lot of times in the syndication world over here, everyone goes, oh, I still have my W-2. Some of them are doctors, some of them are engineers, but they're still doing their W-2. That's what fix and flip is for us. It's our W-2. It's our big cash flow vehicle for our organization. But we got stuck holding on to a lot of those, and then we determined we liked it, so we bought some duplexes. As we'd create enough cash flow, we'd buy duplexes, fourplexes. But then when you got into that, say, 2016 range, 17, the market started getting really, really good. And those houses that we bought at a tax sale for $10,000-$15,000 were now worth $150,000. You know, our payoffs were nothing or very little unless we done some cash out refis. And so then we had a bunch of duplexes and fourplexes we accumulated over time. But now we had a big packages or houses we could sell off, and we'd sell them off in 10s or 20s. We'd start 1031ing into apartments. And then from 16 to 2020-ish, 19, then we got our first big, like it was 134 unit. We had some 20s and 30s, then we got into that 100. And then once we saw the 134 unit, we went, wow, we can manage this with the same amount of people it takes. You know, we have to have 4 times this to manage the same units in duplexes and fourplexes, because we're vertically integrated with the property management and construction company. And then from there, we got some commercial, realized I wanted bigger commercial and bigger multifamily. So fast forward to early 22, we didn't raise, other than like hard money lending, we didn't raise a penny of capital until 22. And then that's when in 22, we started raising capital, went to the syndication model. And the biggest reason for us was, you know, we'd 1031 stuff and say I had $1 million and I needed to place it. Well, I can only place it in, you know, a certain size of a deal with just my capital. So we would syndicate a deal. That way we had a larger deal to put our money in, even though we couldn't do it by ourselves. So that's still our model today. We put a good deal together. We know how much we want to bring to the table, and then we bring the rest in and raise it.
Very interesting. So the one thing I like to try and do on these is we have a lot of new listeners, I guess you should say, that are a little bit younger. Can you break down, just like in simple terms, how a syndication process works for people that are not familiar with that?
Yeah. So a syndication is virtually broke down between what we call a general partner and a limited partner. The general partner is the person that is going to manage the asset, put the deal together, find the deal. Should be someone experienced to do all those things. So if you're a new listener, I know not a lot of new people do it. I don't agree with that. I think you need to get your experience and your feet wet before you do it, because the next part is the limited partners are the people that you're raising money. So you buy something for $10 million, the bank loans you $6 million, you need another $5 million to cover, you know, equity and closing costs. Well, now you got to go raise that $5 million, and then you give up a piece of ownership, and then between cash flow and when you sell it, all that is how the limited partner makes money. So the simplest term to me, it's just where a group of people come together to work as a team to take on larger deals versus the I, me mentality, which we had the I, me mentality for 15 to 16 years. Yeah. I wish if there's one thing I could have done different, I wish I'd have got that out of my head a long time ago. It was always, I want to be the best. I want all the deals. But 10% of, $100 million is more than 100% of $1 million, right? It's pretty simple math. So but at that same time, going through that fix and flip world, we're successful in this syndication and raising capital. We're really good at what we do, but it's because we had a lot of years with a lot of mistakes, and we know how to we know how to run the operational side of things extremely well. Whereas if it's your first day starting out, I mean, I guess just lean on professionals, really good property management company. But
yeah, I remember, I can't remember what podcast it was, Justin, a guy who moved from like more, single family residency to, more corporate stuff. And he was like, all you're doing is just adding numbers to it. It's basically the same thing. Who was that?
Yeah.
Just bigger numbers.
Yeah. It scares me personally still. Yeah. But yeah, maybe we'll get there here pretty soon, Justin.
Yeah. We're, Brian, we talked about it on the last podcast, but Vince and I just started doing stuff here in St. Louis with another guy, Matt Camp, starting out with some of the smaller stuff. But yeah, it's exciting. It's fun to start a new market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right though. There's different pieces of it that change, especially like I would say like duplex to fourplex versus single family. Like I think that's a pretty easy transition. The biggest transition is when you get from, because then even that kind of segues into multifamily. It's going into the commercial, like the retail centers. That's our two classes are multifamily and retail strip centers. That's what we're after now, or only looking at. But there is quite the culture shock when you go from multifamily to commercial. It just operates very different. You're reconciling tenants, and the tenant base is different. So, but going from single family, duplex, fourplex, 16plex, 100plex, like I think it's a pretty good row. How fast you take that road, but it's a pretty good road to travel.
Yeah. Just the numbers are changing.
Yeah. I want to get back to the flipping part a little bit more.
Sure.
Just because I know, a lot of listeners are definitely going to be getting into into that kind of thing. We always like to hear horror stories. I'm sure you've had some. Do you have a particular story of a flip that you can kind of walk through and how you guys got through it? That it's not the end of the day. It's not the end of your business. There's always solutions to everything kind of thing. I always like to hear those.
Yeah, for sure. Even going to the first one was one, they tell you where the mistakes we made.
Right.
Like on paper, we did the traditional, we looked at comps, we saw what we thought comps could work for. We ran a budget on it. We didn't do in-depth due diligence and walk through the house. And like I said, when we opened it, the whole back of the house, it was completely caved in. The roof was caved in. The walls were starting to tilt. Like it was probably should have been. In today's time, I would
tear down.
Yeah, I wouldn't remodel it again. That's for sure. But and it probably would have lost money. It took a lot of our own. We were just starting out, so we did a lot of the paint. We did a lot of the framing, and we looked through it, and the comps just weren't making sense because it had such a small yard. There ended up being a vacant lot next to it. So talking about throwing good money after bad, we went and we found the owner of the lot. We were able to negotiate that at a pretty reasonable price. Well, it turned it into this, I think it was like 0.6 of an acre, because it was a half-acre lot next door. Okay. It was like 2 or 3 city lots, but we added it to it, fenced it in. We played off of that backyard piece, and we were able to get substantially more than the comps were showing just for the small lot that it was sitting on. And we were able to we actually ended up making, I think we made like $30,000 on it at the time, but nice. We were looking to lose money on it. But a big lesson for us was, and since that day, now we're huge on the due diligence piece, because there's so many times I looked at the comps, the ARV is this, and you see people throw it around all the time, but if you don't really get into the bones of it, it can be a major problem. And once you start doing it a ton, especially when you're in a market like ours, you can't just lipstick things, throw it out there, because then it'll catch up to you really quick, and then no one will want anything to do with you. So
yeah. Does your business have a retail branch too?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our own in-house sales, and then we have a brokerage piece we work with. Yeah. So we
you want your flips to be amazing.
Yeah. Either if we touch it, like we offer, like we even do a small, small warranty after, to where we'll come back and fix certain things after the sale. So yeah, I mean, if we're gonna what we call flip it in those terms, then we want it to be right. So it's either. We used to do this thing where it's like, well, let's just find the middle of the road. There's no middle of the road. The construction team's going to take it to the next level. We're going to overspend on it. But the problem is you can't tell someone, well, we only did the paint, this and that. No, you made it look pretty, so we expect perfect. So we either take it to what we call a full make ready phase, which is like 158 point inspection we now do through our technicians. All that's in house. But if we're not going to do that, then it's just as is. So it's either or most of the time.
Yeah. How many different branches do you got going on right now?
We're working on consolidating that. Like as we stand entities, there's probably 30 plus of them. We used to have, so new construction was a branch, fix and flip was a branch. Everyone stood out on all these same branches, and then we merged it all into like the Fergmar name. Yeah. So everyone's Fergmar, like one team, one fight kind of. But we have our construction division. We have our fix and flip and new construction, and we molded all into one division. So now underneath that entity, we have our acquisitions department, we have our dispositions department, and then we have our own property management company as well. At one point, we had our own showroom. We sold all of our own cabinets, windows, supplies. We shut that down last year. It was fun. It just you get to a point where it's like, okay, how many pieces do you want your hands in before you go? This is too much, Yeah. So we've honed that back in a little bit.
Yeah.
Interesting. How do you, with all of that going on, how do you manage all of that? Like I know what we do. We've got, 2 or 3 companies that keeps us pretty busy. It sounds like you've got way more going on than that. So very curious to kind of see like how you're able to manage all of that stuff. that comes across your desk?
Probably the hardest piece. We had for the longest time, we had everyone as, like, we would call them divisions. We had a division manager, and then we had a general manager who kind of oversaw most of that mainly over the sales piece of it, but he was the general manager with some of the HR, so what have you. But in early 23, he left. And so we were at this we were already trying to bring everyone as one piece, and it wasn't really working because we had been so divisional for so long. Like, we literally, people in the building would use us versus them, we versus y'all. Like, I mean, in meetings, and I'd look at them and be like, no, it's us. What do you mean? It's not you or me or us or them. And so we're now on the EOS model. I don't know if you're familiar with EOS. It's the entrepreneurial operating system. I said it on a podcast the other day, and like, what is that? But it just really focuses on, boxes, having the right person in the right seat. And we really dive into our accountability chart. Like, you find someone that they're the right fit for the right seat, and once you have that, you coach them and let them be accountable for it. Make sure that they're that 70-80% rule. Are they making the decision you want to see 70-80% of the time? The other 20%, you just have to deal with it. And we're still struggling through it. I just had a bunch of conversations with some of our leadership team yesterday. We're heavily struggling through it now. And it's hard. There'll be times where they're like, hey, you just kind of put your hand in there. And even though you know how to do it, that was, maybe I got the answer faster or had a better answer, but I still stepped all over their toes. And how do they lead their team? So that's been the biggest deal for us. But I would say I'm a firm believer. It became a lot easier to scale when I realized that just surrounding myself with people that I can go point at everybody in this building and I can tell you what they are better than me at. Hands down.
That's cool.
150%. And if you can't get past that mentality, like I still have, I have a really good friend of mine that runs multiple businesses. And I remember a year or two ago, he was telling me, he was like, oh, I have to clock in tomorrow. And I'm like, what do you mean clock? He's like, oh, I'm on the schedule tomorrow at his store. He has some retail locations. I said, you're on the schedule? He's like, yeah. Well, then I saved the $12 an hour. And I'm like, no, like, you like find someone that's really good at doing X and you go scale and do this. So that's both pieces of it, but we put a lot of trust in our team, and don't get me wrong, it's hard at times because there's times they make a decision and I wouldn't have made that same decision, but that's okay. It's just, you have to, if it'll allow you to scale even further. So just good people. There's no way I could do it without that.
It's great. I'm glad you said that. I mean, we're still working towards that on some of our stuff, but like having the right people in the right seats that are better than you at stuff. Like Vince is way better at content than I am. I'm not a big fan of it. It's not my favorite thing. It's not I'll do it if I have to, but it's like, I don't enjoy doing it and I'm not that good at it. Vince, you can see him on camera and you're like, this dude freaking loves being on camera, talking, like coming up with creative stuff. And it's like me, I'm like, I want to tinker in the background and make things run better, and like improve this process here and there, which my guess is Vince probably doesn't really like that part of it.
No.
But that's super cool. I like that a lot.
I don't know if you ever read the book. The book just came out, the Six Geniuses, Patrick Lencioni. But he talks about, in that book, he talks about how he worked at a marketing firm, and he's working at the marketing firm, and he loved it. He was great. He did so well. He'd get promoted and he'd get moved up the ladder. And then multiple times he'd come home to his wife and he'd be like, I hate my job again. And he determined he hated his job because he's doing things he didn't want to do. And it's funny, in like this past few months since reading that, I started going to the gym at 5 a.m. last year. And I'm like, I just don't understand why I'm just dead tired some days by 3 or 4. I thought it was a caffeine thing. I'm cutting back coffee. Well, what I realized was it's the moment, like if the sales or acquisition team, like if I'm walking the floor and they're like, hey, you got a second? Can you answer this? Like, that's what I love. That or numbers. I feed into it. And it doesn't matter how early I got up. I have all the energy in the world. Yeah. And I sit in some of these meetings and I'm just like, I just want to beat my head against the table. I have to be part of them. So that's where I really look at my focus. I'm like, okay, if I want to beat my head against the table, I add that to a list, and we use Asana. I have a list of, it's like, I call it my delegate and elevate chart. And, circle, you hear everything, circle things you don't want to do and find a way to delegate it. Focus on what you're good at. So every time I sit in those meetings, I make a mental note. When the meeting's done, I go add what that meeting was about. And that's my beat my head list. And my goal is next year, find a way to not have to be in those meetings and find someone who enjoys it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely got to enjoy what you do. Like we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier today too. Even with the money aspect, you got people that make a ton of money and don't enjoy what they do, and you got people that enjoy what they do and might not make a ton of money, but they're far happier, because they're in their element of doing what they do. But yeah.
I mean, there's days me and my partner have talked about, we used to drive around in a truck, and we, payroll was us. We wrote checks out of the truck. Now payroll is our corporate offices in a bank building we bought. So the teller lanes is where a lot of the payroll happens for contractors and stuff on Friday. Nice. Right. But it used to be us in a checkbook. But those days were did we have the same money and the different lifestyle? No, but there's just the simplicity of it. We drove around, checked on the job. Oh, well, your job looks good for the week. Here, let me pay you X amount of dollars. But that simplicity. So if someone's doing, 5 flips a year, 10 flips a year, and they have a good lifestyle and it works for them, and the simplicity, like sometimes, because you'll hit that point, where, man, I'm making less money with more work. Cause like at a certain point, if you scale big enough, there's going to be things you don't want to do or you're not good at. I just don't think people realize that sometimes. They think, oh, I have to do all of them. No, could you hire someone to do the accounting piece if you don't want to do it? And then can you use your skills to go do a few more deals or, grow the revenue line? But it's just hard to figure that out. It's painstaking years sometimes to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, and I've noticed, like, for me, like, as we've grown over the years in our company, is like, I will unintentionally get sucked back into things that, as you're growing and you're like, well, this needs attention again. And I'm like, okay, I'll just hop in and help it. And then I realized, like, 4 months went by and I'm like, oh, this last 4 months has kind of sucked. Like, this has not been what I wanted to do. How did I get back into this mode? What advice do you have for, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs that do that, but what advice do you have for entrepreneurs that kind of run into that cycle too? Like, as they're growing, getting sucked back in and staying probably a little longer than they need to.
I mean, I don't know if I've earned the right to give the advice on that, since I just went through this again.
I mean, all right.
But I mean, I think I don't think it ever goes away, because you need to be there when they, like, for instance, we just got rid of, like, I don't want to say got rid of, when we did some staffing changes, that we shifted the person who was handling, like, our insurance and some of those pieces of it is no longer with us, and it shifted to another department at a higher level. And I dove in because it was new for her department. She took it on, and I dove in and was sitting on insurance calls and reviewing policies again and all that. But it just happened, and then I realized for a 2-week period, I'm like, man, these are long days, because it's not something I really enjoy doing, but it needed to be done. But, again, I think you have to be very intentional, because like, to your point, it's easy to get sucked in, and before you know it, you're doing it for a month or 2 months or a year maybe, and you don't realize what you've done. And if you are trying to grow something that has the accountability chart, not only can it be a drain on yourself, are you pushing the person that's supposed to be doing it even further back? So we've gotten real big in our company is there's the accountability chart. We do not violate the accountability chart. That's like you're going to prison if you violate the accountability chart. It's like a law, but there's a difference between being the accountable person, but being a resource. And I tell them that all the time. Yeah. Like, I mean, unless someone starts with the company that started doing this before me, I'll always be the person with the most experience in certain aspects. I can be a resource. Like, if you come ask me, hey, I'm reviewing this file, what do you think we should pay for it? What should we sell it for? I'm not accountable for that. I can be a resource and tell you from my experience. But at the end of the day, as long as I don't go out there and tell them you do this or you do that, because the second you do it, they're going to go, oh, well, the owner said, so I'm going to go do it. So right. I try to focus on, but yeah, even I'll delete comments when I'm typing an email or something. I'll be like, I'll say, you should, or whatever. And I'll put in my opinion or in my experience. I'll try to word things so they get it. Like, I'm just giving you my thoughts, my opinion. Now you go make the decision.
So that accountability chart, that's not something we have currently. So if I'm understanding correctly, that's kind of who's responsible for what, right? And then you've got who can be a resource to that as well. So like you were saying,
it's who's accountable for it. So let's say having success, like podcasting in y'all's organization was Justin's accountability, but Vince schedules the podcast, right? So on the accountability chart, it's Justin, and people would come and be like, no, it's not. Vince is the one that does all the calls, manages all of it. Yeah. But if it gets broke, who am I going to? Like, so if I own the podcast company, I'm going to go, Justin, why do I not have 5 podcasts this week? You don't get to say, well, because Vince didn't schedule them. Nope. It's your department. You're accountable for it, Vince is the one who does it, or vice versa, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now if Vince goes, all right, let's say Brian owned the company and Justin runs the podcasting department, Vince would be like, man, I can't get 5 of them. Brian used to do this all day. Maybe he could be a resource and give me some advice. So Vince can come to me and go, hey, how do you think I get my next 2 podcasts scheduled?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not telling him how to do it, because you're telling him how to do it, because it's your accountability. So it's you have to be very intentional to make it work. We'll be going on 2 years here pretty soon. And
you have to
I don't want to say it's a mess, but yeah. And you can break it real easily and lose a lot of good work. But when it's dialed in, the weeks when it's working, it's on fire, and you can tell.
That makes a lot of sense, because you're then empowering those people in those roles to then own their area, right, of what they're doing, and then have who they can go to if needed. But ultimately, it's up to that person to do what they're supposed to be doing, which I like that a lot. That's cool.
It's the only way you're eventually not sitting there, right? Like, call me if you need me, but I'll be over here, on this other company or on a beat or whatever, wherever you decide to be. But if that's your goal, I've talked to some people and they go, no, that's not my goal. I love being there working 50, 60 hours a week, and I'm not looking for that to stop. Oh, okay. Well, then don't really need to hire anybody else. Keep doing all the work, and hey, kudos.
Yeah.
Teach their own, right? Like, not everything works for everybody. No, I don't want to be, my kids go to college, I want to be visiting them, not stuck in an office 50 hours a week.
Right. And that's something too that, for me as a business owner, that was always challenging at first to realize, is like, most people don't want to be an entrepreneur. Like, there's tons of people that are just happy contributing and helping be a good contributing member to a company that's growing and have a future and a path and everything, where, the thought process I always get stuck in is like, well, because I'm an entrepreneur and all the people I know are entrepreneurs, everybody's an entrepreneur. That's not the case. It's like, it's just not, where I think my brother Ryan, in one of his companies, his number 2 for a while, he asked him like, hey, what's your goal? He's like, dude, I don't want to be a number 1. I want to be a solid number 2 to a great number 1. He's like,
sure,
that's what I want. I'm like, okay, all right, cool. So that's a good realization for, I think, a lot of business owners to realize, like, that you can find those people that, like you said, want to do the 50 hours a week and put in their time, make their money, go do what they want on the weekend, and come back on Monday.
I've had leadership level people in my organization. They'll say, I'm not equipped. I'm not the person or the personality to go do it on my own. I need to know that I need to be here by a certain time. I need to know what are my KPIs, what are my expectations, and I can crush them, but I don't want to do it on my own. I mean, I was sitting I went to lunch at the kids' school yesterday, and I was talking to another business owner, and she was we were having a conversation. You talk about trading time for money. Like, that's this new thing. Oh, I'm going to go start my own business, so I quit trading, time for money. But what happens is you get into the business, like, if you don't do it right, it gets worse, because there's plenty of months they get paychecks. I don't. I still put in the time. I'm in the building, 6 something in the morning, sometimes here till 12 hours straight, and then no paycheck for the month. Because we're just we don't get a salary. We're just paid off of what's left. So if you didn't profit that month, but it's not always better. Like, I envy these people sometimes. They get paid twice a month. They get their bonus checks. Like, when they check out on vacation, it's vacation for them. Like, when I'm on vacation, it doesn't stop.
I will say that is one thing I really miss as a business owner, is like going on vacation and not worrying about anything. Like, just everything's turned off. I'll be back in a week. And like, I actually tried it last year for our my wife and I's 15-year anniversary, and the whole time I was like, I'm trying to enjoy it and have fun, but the whole time I'm like, what's going on? Like, there's something that someone needs, or there's something going on.
Was this when you were in Oregon or
Washington?
Or Washington,
like, we had a lot of fun, and there was a lot of times where I wasn't thinking about work, but it would be like first thing in the morning, or as we're getting ready for bed or whatever, where I'd be like, I feel like I should be doing something more, and this is kind of weird for me, when I'm so used to always being involved in stuff. I
remember you like texting me, and I'm like, aren't you in Washington?
Yep. Yeah, and I think there was really only one thing I had to do. We had to get something signed for taxes or something at the end of the year that we had missed, we missed an email from our CPA, And I was like, all right, I got to work for a few minutes. I got to get something done. I have to do this. But every other trip I've ever been on, other than that, there's something going on that I'm doing.
I've tried the hybrid where like I snooze all the notifications on my phone, and just kind of hit them like in the morning while the kids are getting ready, or it depends if the kids are with us or it's just me and my wife. And then maybe in the evenings try to catch up. But I'm progressively getting better. We're going to do an anniversary / honeymoon because we never took a honeymoon. We'll go to Europe for a few weeks, probably
Nice.
like April-ish time frame. So like one of my goals in the first quarter of 25 is finding someone in the building that I turn my email over to while I'm gone. Because what I don't want to do is come back with 550 emails. Right. But that's what's going to happen. So my goal is to create that trust relationship and grow it with someone in the building that like you respond to if you don't like my text will be available. If you can't answer something, my only lifeline, I'm going to delete all the apps off my phone. If you need something, text me and then you respond on how it needs to be done. That way I get back. That's where my mind's going with it. I'm caught up. I'm not behind, but I didn't have to, work outside of that aspect of just giving some guidance.
Yeah. How many kids do you got?
Three. Two boys. Awesome. I got a 12 and 9-year-old boy and a 5-year-old going on 15-year-old girl. So
yeah, you got sports going on in there too.
Yeah, both kids are in. My daughter just started competitive dance. Both kids play select soccer, so we travel every week. This past weekend, I had to trade my SUV in for the long version. We were in Austin, Texas, at some games, and the kids were fighting being able to get out of the car. And it's like, I guess it's suburban mode,
Getting the big one.
I thought you were going to say you were going to trade your SUV for a minivan.
No. They make extended Escalades, fortunately.
Yeah.
So
I drove a Honda Odyssey for 10 years.
Oh wow.
And sometimes I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I miss it with the sliding doors.
I was gonna say I miss the sliding doors. That's the only thing I miss about the minivan.
But yeah, I like my my SUV far better with the kids and stuff. But
yeah, I just have to worry about them slamming it into the car next to us when we get out. Now
that's a good point. That's a good point. I wish I could convince my wife to get a minivan. I couldn't even convince her to get the longer vehicle. You're right. Like. She's always driving the hip what's in style, and I'm over here in dad mode. So
there you
it's
go.
All right, though. We'll take it any day of the week.
No, I when you kind of go back to business too, I always kind of like to throw some family element stuff in it. The same can be said, when you're kind of getting your kids to, with roles and responsibilities around the house. And like I have a 16-year-old son, he's one of 5, and like. He needs to start mowing the lawn and doing things. And I can mow the lawn far better than he ever could. And I can always intervene, right? But I'm trying to all right, dude, if you're going to mow the lawn, you got little mohawks going on over here. We need to, tighten it up a little bit. And it's the same thing of giving him his space, knowing that he can do it, but not me going, you know what? I'm just going to do it because I can do it better. Yeah. And down in the basement of the house is the kids' domain. It's, there's 3 bedrooms down there. There's games and the TV and the living room, the bar and all that stuff. That's their domain to clean every week and to tidy up and stuff. And I can get down there and do things myself. And Susie's always got to remind me no, they need to do this. This is all on them. I know you can go down there and clean the bathroom better, but this is going to be them, and I always just try to kind of, bring that, what we can do in business, we can also do in our family aspect of things. We can always tighten things up. We can always, respect our children and say, this is their opportunity to do it. And could it be done better? Yeah. But you've given them the opportunity and they're going to get better and they're going to master what they're, going to be doing. But I definitely don't want my kids to go into life not knowing how to do dishes, Yeah.
Right. Or just understanding, to me, the accountability is just even when it comes to homework, we're dealing with that with our oldest. He was terrible last year. And I told him look, dude, you're accountable for it. It's on you. Yep. And, one of his consequences is, A's and B's are a requirement, right? Love to see all A's, but A's and B's are a requirement. He has a phone now. I'm 79.99999 phone's gone. It's over.
Yeah.
Like, and he lost it for half the year last year, but I just had a long talk with him beginning of the year. I'm like, you're accountable. So, I mean, I think that whether it's like your point, mowing the grass, cleaning, doing their homework, like them just understanding I'm accountable for it. And if I'm not, like, part of our thing, they call it, LMA, you got to lead, manage, and hold them accountable. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the vice president of your company, or if you're talking about your 10-year-old, you got to lead them, manage them to a certain extent, a little different with kids. You got to hold them accountable when they don't do what their accountability. Like I really think business and family just go hand in hand. I mean, you got to mold it a little bit, but it's the same exact thing, like it's just, I think a lot of times it's not treated that way. And that's where people fail, going from being babied to getting out to the real world, or vice versa,
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of it correlates back and forth every day. Like something our dad told us growing up, he was an entrepreneur himself. It was, do it right or do it twice. It was like something he always said, like, whether if it was mowing the lawn, because I was the one that was like, I used to piss my dad off so much with this, because my entrepreneur brain is like, how do I make this as efficient and quick as possible? Yeah. My dad likes nice, crisp lines. And I was like, I'm going to go in circles. So like I'd start, on one part and just like, I don't have to turn and stop and make it shorter. And I would just go in circles until I met the center. And my dad would be like, why does my grass look like a target? Like, what is going on? Like, this is not how you do these things. But just funny story. But yeah, like it was always doing it right or doing it twice and leaving those strips of uncut grass that Vince was talking about. And I think a lot of it correlates to business stuff easily.
Yeah, another old one is, I remember an old boss told me this, but his saying was that once a task has begun, never leave it till it's done. Do the task, be the task great or small, do it right or not at all. Like it's a long little, but he had that on his wall. And like, I'm like that with the kids. Like, if you start a sport, like you signed up for the season, 8 months, 9 months. Yeah. I don't care if you like it. You're not quitting. Now, after this season, you decide not, that's fine. I'm the same way in the organization. It's real quick when we're trying to do stuff and people are like, oh, I'll help out there. I'll take on this initiative. I'll take on planning this. And then, oh, well, now I'm busy. I can't do this. No, you said you're going to do it. Like you need to, that's a huge one for me. When I see people that are extremely competent, but they fail to see tasks through, I think you can be the most skilled person in the world. But if you can't see a task to the finish line, then I really don't want you on the team. Right? Yeah. It doesn't matter how good you would have been if you never got it done. So, but, I think it all correlates quite a bit.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, before we end it here, any leaving comments or anything you want to share with our listeners?
Being the big part of y'all's podcast is probably that fix and flip world. I said it kind of earlier, but I'll say it again. There's just so many things on social media, I think, where people want to start out and they see the big shiny deals and all that, but just grabbing one, if you want to start, and two, whether you're doing 2 deals or 200 deals, there's probably someone doing less and there's always someone doing more. Don't worry about that. Be the best you can be at it and grow it to where you can grow it, because if you take those blinders off, and there's a reason horses wear blinders in a race, right? Focus on what you got going on and kill it in your own space.
It's so good. Yeah, I would also say if you are new, just stay away from social media. Like, don't go follow all the investors out there and what they're doing. Like, it's just gonna like bog you down, because everybody's always about like, I got this many doors and I got this many deals and I got this and I drive this Lambo and it's like, just focus on you, man, and get that first deal. And stay away from social media on that aspect of things.
It's so true. I'm with Justin. I hate it, but like it's a necessary evil. So we're posting and putting stuff out there to make connections. It's super hard for me to do it because you just know I have 10,000 doors, but I only own like 0.5% of them. They just fail to not tell you the details. So focus on be good at what you're good at, be the best version of yourself. And that's all that matters.
Well, cool, man. We really appreciate you being on the podcast, and you're on the beach right now with the palm trees behind you. Yeah. So it was really awesome having you, dude.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Brian. It was nice meeting you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, man.